In this video, I'm going to show you how to build your own simplified database programming interface. By the end, you have auto-generated APIs for querying your database in a few clicks, as well as have the ability to write your own complex queries too and add them to the list here, either by yourself or using an AI helper. So, for example, you can put in bring back all the movies from the year 1960 and it will generate a query for you that you can save. Not only this, you will have a GraphQL and REST playground, API keys, and even an observability dashboard. By this, I mean this dashboard right here that will allow us to see how long a call takes, for example. Finally, you can manage the changes in a Git-like branching system and decide which environment to deploy the changes to. That means different teams can get different environments where they can test their changes without impacting the work of other teams. Think about the benefits of Git applied to your database APIs. Now, why might you want to use this? As developers get started, we must deal with data modeling, aligning the application's requirements to data definitions and schema design, integrating database drivers, and working with the unique syntax of a database query language. Phew, that's a lot. Wouldn't it be great to spend less time figuring out how to work with databases and more time writing code? And wouldn't it be great if your whole team had this tool too? By the end, you will not only have this cool tool, but you can continue on to build full-stack applications, real-time APIs for all your real-time data with access control, scale serverless Lambda, build microservices, and so much more. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get to building this now. Please go ahead and click on the link in the video description below in order to get started. Okay, so let's do it. First up, you're going to head over to Neurelo. Just click on the link in the video description below and it should take you to this lovely dashboard. Now, of course, you're going to click here, but I've already signed up, so I'm just going to choose to log in. And once you have logged in, you should be able to see this lovely, lovely dashboard, which at the moment is empty because we're starting from scratch. So the first thing we are going to do is just go ahead and create our first project. So click on new. This is my organization name. This has been generated for me. And we're just going to call this project something. So let's say that this project, we're going to be dealing with movies. So I'm just going to call this movies and we're going to choose to work with a MongoDB database. You do have Postgres SQL, MySQL to your disposal too, but let's just go ahead and do MongoDB for this tutorial run through. And then once you're comfortable with it, you can go back and you can use whatever database engine you wish. So MongoDB, make sure to select that. And the language I'm going to choose is JavaScript. Once again, just make sure you're doing exactly everything the same as I am so that you don't run into any errors on this tutorial. So let's go ahead and now click Create. So here is our project. We have movies, we've got a dashboard, definitions, and we even have settings where you can delete this if you wish. So let's go back to the dashboard, and wonderfully Neurelo has some steps for us, so they're making it really easy for us in order to connect our data source very efficiently. So step one, at a data source, we've selected MongoDB as our data engine, so you will see MongoDB here, and let's go ahead and select connect data source. So what shall we call this? Well, you can call it whatever you wish. I'm going to go ahead and choose to call this sample data, as we're just going to get some sample data actually that MongoDB provide for this tutorial. Eventually, when you again get used to this platform and this tool, you can go ahead and connect your own database, one that you created at MongoDB, but for now, let's just go ahead and use some sample data. But to connect to MongoDB, we need a connection string. So let's get it. Just head over to MongoDB, okay, mongodb.com. You once again can just use the link in the video description below and just sign up if you haven't already. I have, so I'm just going to choose to sign in. I'm going to choose to sign in with my Google account for this. So once again, this is just the sign up process. But once that's done, you should see a dashboard that is like this. Okay, my organization here, Anus.org, has been generated for me, and my projects currently are empty because, like I said, we're starting from scratch. So let's go ahead and create a new project. New project, we can call this demo if you would like. And then I'm just going to go ahead and leave that as it is and click next. Now, you're going to have to give access to the email address that you sign up with. So I'm going to leave this as it is. I am the project owner, and I'm just going to click Create Project. So this is looking good. We, of course, have an organization. We also now have a project, essentially. The project is demo, and we're going to create a deployment. So just go ahead and select here. And now I'm going to select the free option, as this is a tutorial, and you can just call your cluster, because that's what we're making now. You can just leave it as cluster 0, and then I'm just going to leave these as the default, so AWS and Bahrain. Of course, you can choose an option that maybe is closer to you, but this looks right for me. And let's go ahead and select Create Deployment. So great, now that is doing its thing, and we're going to have a way to connect to the cluster. So this is essentially where we get that connection string that I was talking about. Now here you're going to have some important information, your current IP address. So make sure to save that. Make sure to save your username and your password. So just copy it and save it somewhere safe. And once you have done that, just click Create Database User. And that user, so Anya, has been added for me. Okay, now let's choose a connection method. I'm going to choose drivers, so go ahead and select the same one. And we're just going to scroll down. This is the connection string that we are going to use, so this is important. So you can save this, or you can review set of changes, and here it is again, but just kind of without all the faff appended at the end. So we're going to have to put in our password here. So let's copy this and just paste it into the connection string. And our password, well, we can just go ahead and grab our password and replace it in here, or you can put it in here and it will be added or injected into that. But we're not yet done. This is the connection string to our cluster. We then have to pick out a database in it by appending some information here. Another thing we can do is add our IP addresses from Neurelo into here. So all you'd have to do is go to IP addresses in the IP network access. And at the moment, Atlas has allowed our IP address to access it. Or if you want, you can delete this. Perhaps this is easier for a demo. Just delete that, and then you can just allow access from anywhere. Just for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to make it super simple, allow access from anywhere to Atlas. So go ahead and click confirm. And great, so now Neurelo will be able to connect with Atlas. But if you just wanted to give access to Neurelo, well, you'd have to delete this one and add IP addresses in here. And those would be, let's just go ahead and select one of these right here. Okay, so you'd have to get that one and add it in here, and get that one and add it in here also. Okay, so that's a bit more advanced. If you just want to check this works, just allow access from anywhere like I am by adding this IP address like this. So let's just wait for that to do its thing and the status to be resolved rather than pending, and let's move on. Okay, so that is now active. This is great. So now let's go to database, okay? And in here, we'll have cluster 0 as we saw, and let's browse the collections. So if you click browse on collections, this is going to retrieve a list of databases and collections, including some sample data. This is some sample data for us that we can play around with, okay? Again, once you are comfortable with this and you've gone through the demo, feel free to use your own data, not the sample data in here. But for now, let's move on. So once again, organization, project name, demo, cluster called cluster 0, and our database, which is called sample mflix. And it's got all this other cool stuff in here. So let's go ahead and get sample mflix. And all I'm going to do is append that onto the end of here, sample mflix like so. And let's test the connection. So connection test in progress, and connection test completed successfully. So this is now done. We've done it. we've connected essentially Neurelo to this database called sample mflix, and let's click submit. Okay. So if you click submit, this is doing a bunch of stuff. We've just added the data source of sample data. Now we're introspecting the data source. Okay, so what that is happening is it's actually looking through all of this, and it's going to create some definitions for us. So tick, it's done that. It's built out a schema from this data. Okay, so comments, embedded movies, sessions, theaters, users. And if you go in here, and you go to definitions, you will now see the same comments, embedded movies, sessions, theaters, and users. So that is pretty cool. It's built out some schema for us. This is looking so great. Let's have a moment here to just maybe have a quick look at this in a little bit more detail. So if we go ahead and have a look at movies themselves, it will tell you all the properties that come with the movies object. Okay, it will also tell you what they are. So this is the inner object. They've also named it as movies awards. That makes sense because awards lives in movies. And you can also essentially view this as JSON if that helps, if that is what you prefer, or that is what you are used to. Another cool thing is this view as ERD, and that will again give you a relationship diagram between all of these objects, which is pretty cool and super useful, especially when explaining stuff to perhaps your team, or especially people, in other teams that don't have a good understanding of the relationship between these data objects. So as you will see, the embedded movies object is here. It's got all the properties in here. Okay, it gives you their type, or it tells you if they are an inner object as defined by Neurelo, or an array, or a string, and so on. So super, super useful. And if it is to go somewhere else, so as you can see, the embedded movies award that has been generated, that name has been generated by Neurelo, this object with all of its properties as well. And it's an inner object of this object right here. So wonderful. I just love how much data there is in here and what we can now query to. So I really love that. Of course, there are so many other things in here. Okay. You can also see the history. So for example, this is all great, but if you want to make changes in here, then you can commit them in Neurelo, and you can even see the history of your commits. So that, if something changes, or if someone in your team changes something, you don't know where that change came from, you can view the commit history, and all of that will become transparent. Okay, I'm going to show you this changing in a bit, where we add our own custom queries later on. So this is, of course, all looking good. Let's go back to the schema builder right here. One other thing that I want to tell you about is the docs. So once again, this has been all generated by Neurelo. This is great. Essentially, this is a RESTful API, right? All you had was just a bunch of data on MongoDB, and suddenly you have all of this. You have all the RESTful API documentation that's been spun up, and all of the endpoints that you can use and operations. So of course, this is a GET request to find many comments, and it will essentially tell you what endpoint you need to go to, and even give you some code in order to help you do that. So, I mean, this is just pretty incredible if you need to spin up RESTful documentation pretty quick, as well as keep it up to date. And that is the most important part, okay? Because this will always be kept up to date with what your database actually looks like, right? So if you, for example, in the past wrote up some RESTful API documentation and put it on the internet and then forgot about it, it might be outdated. This will be a great way to make sure that it's always fresh. The documentation is always fresh because it's been derived straight from the data, which is literally mind-blowing if you think about it. That is just like the best thing ever. You also have documentation for GraphQL as well. So this is if you need to communicate with the GraphQL API. So this will help you write your GraphQL queries too. Okay. Wonderful. So this is looking good. However, let's go back to the dashboard. So we've got a few more things to do. Let's next create an environment. So let's select new environment. I'm just going to call this default I'm going to select a region, and now I'm going to select observability as well, which will just give us a little more information about what's going on under the hood. So let's click create. Okay, so that is now going to do its thing. An environment created successfully. So now let's go to environment, and amazing. So this environment at the moment will allow us to essentially have an API playground, which is incredible. So we can make requests or essentially create queries, because we're going to be using GraphQL as well, to our database, along with give us some API keys. Okay, let's just run through this a little bit further. Let's go ahead and create a new API key. Once again, let's just call this demo key. And you can change the permissions. I'm just going to keep them as default and click create. So once again, just keep this key safe, okay? Copy it and paste it somewhere safe. You can, of course, revoke it as well. I will show you how to do that. If you go to here, you can see your API keys, and you can delete one or you can create a new one. That is completely up to you. This lives in the environments as well. So we've got API keys. We also have observability, which will give us different types of metrics on the requests we make. And great. And back to APIs, we get that documentation. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's go back to the dashboard, and then let's start our runners in order to essentially start using our APIs. Okay, so now all 5 steps have been completed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All your read and write APIs done, including documentation, access control, and version control. And let's go to our API playground. So here we have it. Here is our API playground. Again, mind-blowing. This is all generated from some database, right? All this documentation, all of these keys and access to the database have been made. Okay, so what shall we do? Well, let's actually go back to our database, and under users, we can see a user. Here's an object of the name Ned Stark. So maybe let's find this one user by the property of name, just to check everything works. So if we go to users here, we can find many users. And if I just go ahead and put in my API key here, so just make sure that's in there under X API key. And if I just send this over, well, it will bring back all the users, so there is a lot. But if I just want to find one by the name, so name Ned Stark, I can filter it. So I could do bring back one, so select take and click send, and that will just bring back the first user, which is also Ned Stark. Or we can, maybe let's uncomment that out now, so untick it. Let's see who else is in here. There's also Robert Baratheon. So if I just want to find a user with Robert Baratheon, I can filter, and then I could put name Robert Baratheon and send. And that will just bring back any user with the name Robert Baratheon. So as you can see, there is one. Wonderful. So that's me kind of just testing out the data. Of course, you can use any of these just the way that I was doing right now, or you can use GraphQL. So the GraphQL documentation will look like this. If you're familiar with GraphQL, you will be able to write queries. So you can, again, write a query for a user. So find all the users, and you can bring back all of these things. If I just want to bring back the names of the users, I would delete all the others and send this over, and it will give me essentially all the names. I'm just going to zoom in to show you now. So, okay, here are just the names coming back to me because that is what I put in here. Great. So please feel free to have a play around with that and writing your own GraphQL queries as well. Of course, the API key here has already been, I guess, inputted for me. Wonderful. Let's carry on. So that is the API playground, and we can also create our own custom queries, okay, that we can commit to Neurelo. So these are all the ones that already exist, and under definitions, I can write my own custom queries. So this will just kind of save me time if I'm not happy with the ones that exist and I want to write my own. I can start new. So let's go ahead and write our custom query. I'm going to call this, let's say, 1960 movies, and I want movies that are made in the year 1960. So I've done this by having a look at the database here and looking at movies and selecting a property from here that I want to essentially filter it by. So I've chosen the year of the movies. And essentially now we're going to have a custom query that we're not going to have to write. It will just be amongst all the other queries in my schema. So it will live there. And I can even get an AI assistant to help me write this. So for example, I could do get movies by year and make sure year is 1960 and hit send. And ta-da, we have now made a query. So let's go ahead and use this. And now we can even test the query. So you can test the query. You're just going to have to put in your API key once more and acknowledge that this query will be run against the selected environment. And let's go ahead and do it. So great. And now all these movies should be movies in the year 1960. We did it. So this is an example of a custom query that's going to live amongst your other queries in the schema now if you choose to essentially commit it. Okay? So again, please feel free to maybe write a bit better custom queries. This is just one for demo purposes, but you get the idea. I'm just going to go ahead to choose to commit this. So add 1960 movies custom query and commit. I really love this. And of course, if you now look under docs, you will see custom queries 1960s movie right there. Okay? And that's it. I hope you find this video useful. I thought this was a super cool tool, so I hope you also appreciate it as well. And if you have any questions, please feel free to comment in the comments below. And I hope to see you again soon.